right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of the Candid Cast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in rowing and coxing. So today, obviously, you can see we have a very special episode where I have a guest in-house with me, and I'm so excited because I don't usually get that. So I would like to introduce my co-host, Dameon, who's going to tell us a little bit more about himself before we dive into our topic today. So Dameon, go ahead and tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you're up to, and let's get into it.
Great, happy to be here. And I am obviously a rowing coach, and I started coaching in high school, or coaching high school kids at Capital Crew when I was in my senior year of college. Back in 2005, I haven't taken except I think 6 months off of this coaching career path in that time, and spent 4 years with Capital Crew, spent 3 years with Oakland Strokes, summer with U23 Penn AC guys, a year at UC San Diego before this time at UC San Diego, 4 years at Oregon State, and a year at UPenn. I may be leaving something out, but that's kind of my coaching background.
You do have quite the resume. You've done a lot of coaching.
Yeah, there's lots of good highlights.
Lots of good highlights. Yeah, exactly.
That was purposeful.
Right, of course.
Rather than like, oh, gotta get a new job all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's so cool that you've gotten to coach at so many of these really top level programs, which is really awesome. Now, since this is a show where we're very candid here, this is you're like already afraid. I think I already did. Yeah, exactly. But one of my favorite things about you is that I think I've told you this story before, but I used to be a little bit hesitant about you. It's kind of like, I don't know if I like this guy very much. Like, he's not so sure. And then I actually got to know you, and then I was like, okay, all right, actually, he's pretty cool. He commandeered my launch one time, but he's actually
sorry.
You were coaching Marin. I know, but it's the story is that, like, I don't know.
This is in River City, right?
Yes,
yeah.
River City,
and
exactly.
I had my Capital kids there.
Yeah.
And we were in the same launch doing a joint practice or running races.
Something about it. I thought you were way too in charge, and like there wasn't room for two of us. There's something. Something like
that was my younger days. I was still, trying to figure out who I was. And,
right. Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
So unaware of the wake I was putting out, probably.
Oh, Aren't we all? No, it's quite all right because it actually turned into a very good thing. So I'm obviously so glad that we've been friends for so long now, and it's like, I mean, I admire what you do so much. Like, you just inspire kids in rowing so much, and it's so cool to see what you're doing. So obviously the topic that is sort of on the front of everyone's mind right now is COVID. And what do we do, especially these kids that are trying to come into college and trying to row, like, what is going on? Like, what is going on in the collegiate world? But first of all, like, start, if you don't mind, telling us a little bit about, like, what the end of your season was like. Like, all of a sudden you're getting this news.
Yeah,
sure. That the season just ends.
Yeah, and I think we're not the only program whose season came to an abrupt end. I mean, I think there's very little warning for most programs out there. We actually, the warning that we had was when we found out about the Ivy League, like, oh, they're going to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was 48 hours, maybe to 72 hours, 3 days before our what turned out to be our last practice.
Yeah.
But every practice after that, I was pretty open and honest and saying, hey guys, how you want practice to go today? This absolutely could be our last one. And it wasn't, but I think, 3 days later that there's the Friday morning, and after practice, that was the last one. So there was no space to know that we're going into the last practice of our season, guys. And it was a classic practice. It was aggressive and very difficult. And I think a lot of people, that had we gone into that practice sort of knowing it was our last practice, it would have definitely gone differently. Not for better or for worse at all, but it was kind of nice to just end it with just a good, hard day on the water.
And what was the mood like on your team? Like, knowing, like, these guys
stunned.
Could just be like, any day just could be our last.
I had a lot of disbelief. Nobody really believed that, and until it hit us, and then still, it's like, how do you operate now?
Yeah.
You know?
Like what just happened?
Yeah. And we're still, I think, the more space we get from that event, the better the explanations we'll get. But I was just super happy with how our season went, and even it was very short. I mean, Coach Bond and I, we just got into UC San Diego, and I've had a really good time working with this team. Their culture is astounding. They didn't have a coach in place for the very beginning of their season, and so there was a void in leadership, and the leadership that rose to fill that sort of vacuum was internal. And they filled their schedule. They tried to max out 20 hours a week because that was the limit. They said, okay, let's just do everything we can. And so Coach Bond and I walked in, and we got to, let's give them a rest day here, and let's refine this and tweak that. But there wasn't any need to sort of ask or push this new team to go harder. They were more than willing. And whatever the level you think of any potential athlete on our team or anybody else's, they were willing to find that out.
Yeah.
Which, that you like to think that that's a given in rowing, because it just takes, all sports take this, but rowing, as there's no necessarily professional path, it is one of those pure racing amateur sports where your level of passion will get everything out of it. If you don't give everything to it, then don't expect to
it's a lot of
find
heart.
your potential. That's just it. So
yeah.
But yeah, it was a bummer. I got to know the guys well enough in that short amount of time. I was just so excited. I mean, I cried when he had a little like talk. I mean, it was just like super happy to have the job, and was absolutely excited to see you guys go do your thing, and this is our first season. So yeah.
Yeah, pretty emotional all around. And I'm really hearing that from guys all over the world. And I just can't even imagine what it would be like being a senior and just losing my last year. I mean, I feel for them almost even more than the Olympians. Like I feel for them just as much, getting having the Olympics delayed. But I mean, those seniors, like you can't get that back. There's no senior year.
Well, you choose your senior year. Like, this is my senior year.
Exactly. Like you don't get it back.
And you're like, maybe not. I'm going to come back again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so I know, some guys, different programs are trying to go back for a 5th year so they can get it back to, get a master's or whatever it is. But I mean, some guys are just kind of like, what am I going to do? Another year of school? Like, I don't know if I can,
They're moving on.
Yeah.
And a little sooner than they would have liked. Across the board. So,
yeah.
And I think, again, like, okay, what your senior year of what, the senior year in college is unlike the senior year of high school, where, well, if you want to row in college, you've got 4 more years of student athlete available to you.
Mm-hmm.
But the senior in college, unless you do the 5th year and figure out the money situation, and, again, is the passion so deep, and it needs to be, it needs another vessel in a season of rowing to fill, great. But I think a lot of athletes, they put that structure ahead of them. This is 4 years. This is what I'm going to do, and here's the next step, and that's great. No judgment on anybody's. I'm definitely not one to put metrics on passion. That is inappropriate, and I don't watch you do your thing at practice, and I'm sure you're passionate about it.
So the guys that are sticking around, like maybe they're juniors or below, do they sort of have their own training plans now? Like they still have things that they are doing over summer for when they come back? Fantastic question, and one that is being answered obviously all over the world.
They are doing their own thing, and we help advise here and there, but they're running their own. We're not, checking. They're doing their own thing. And what I love about this is that, especially for a collegiate athlete and now a high school athlete and a middle school athlete, one of the crucial components of being able to, as we mentioned, find your potential in whatever your sport is being able to train on your own, right? And when you're not in the team environment, how do you behave? What do you do? And with collegiate sports, you've got a short winter break and you've got a longer summer break. And in the summer break, there are tons of great options competitive-wise with club rowing. There's lots of stuff. But typically with the winter break, that athlete is probably on their own, using an ergometer and whatever body weight or run, whatever they're doing, right? And they obviously, we give them a curriculum, and from my opinion, like, they're allowed to tweak it however they want. But here's a whole bunch of stuff, pick and choose. Here's 5 options for this zone or whatever, like, and learn how to train yourself. And the best thing about that is you learn how to recover better. And we can go into more of that later if you like. But so my hope is that, and it seems like they are, because we meet with our guys once a week on Zoom minimum, they're all getting really good at that, And so that is an element that adds to our culture, that they're more mature athletes now. And not only that, I think that when you have athletes who understand how to train on their own, there is the population or percentage of athletes that go from intense collegiate competition mode to, I'm done working out. That should diminish, because, and no offense to anybody, how they want to live their lives, that's fine. But I'm just like, God, I'm 42 now, and I watch, a kid, an athlete I coach in high school and or college, and now they don't look the same. They're loving life, and I still love them to bits, but I'm just like, I hope you get back to working out by the time you're 33 or something.
Totally.
Because there's so much more access to fun in sports and in life if you can change your psychology, I guess, from what it was. But anyway, I think if you know how to train on your own and you can deal with yourself that way, then that should be less likely to happen, rather than I need to get away from that mindset for a while. And then it turns into, like, no offense to anybody, 5 years of functional alcoholism or something. So
yeah, no, exactly. Well, and you definitely, I think, learn more about yourself, about, like you said, recovery. And when you can bring a little bit more of the self to the team, the whole team, the whole team benefits from that. And so 100%. It's really cool. You might be, is it so far of a stretch to say that it could benefit, like maybe this COVID thing, not that it's benefiting anyone, but there are
plenty
benefits.
Of silver linings.
Yes.
On all aspects.
That's a good way to put it.
There are
silver lining. Yes.
There's a big silver linings playbook, if you will, that
totally.
will be written, is being written now, and we'll retouch on it later as in our communities. But this is one of those silver linings. And so, the question of, like, well, what are recruiting, or how do you track kids' performance? So these high school kids are still contacting their college coaches and saying, I did this.
Good.
What advice I give to any high school athlete, if you want to get recruited, is find good reasons to contact the programs you're interested in. And one of the best reasons is, hey, I just pulled this split. And I say, it doesn't have to, a lot of high school kids feel that they're restricted to a 2K score or a 5K or 6K score, right? That I'm like, hey, you do something, you impress yourself. I don't really care what the workout was. Tell me about it. That's how we vibe on each other. Right?
I think that's a good thing to know.
You're excited. That's
a really good thing to know.
Yeah. So, and with Coxsons, it's a bit different, and this is something that you probably work with Coxsons anyway. It's like, how do I do stuff to what's new? I don't have an ERG score. I may not even have recordings right now. So when it comes to talking to Coxsons, I just have phone conversations and get to know them as people. And the ones that typically, at least where we are now in our stage, the ones that keep talking to me are probably the ones that I'm going to form like a trust with, a bond with.
Yeah, I was definitely going to ask you about that, because I know it's different with everyone, and it's just so hard to pick Coxsons. So you really do. It does take
way less
trust. It does, yeah. It's true. And, for us, there's not even a lot of hope for big boats anytime soon.
Right.
That's even allowed. So, for all of us, we're kind of like, oh, so I'm like, maybe I'm going to row a single for a while. Get some boat feel, because there just isn't that much to do. Work with other Coxsons and.
I should be putting on an interview, market this thing. But I was thinking of, well, you could, this is what I'm going to advise, actually. It's the next Coxsons that I talked to on the phone. Why don't you do some practice recordings? Why don't you run a 2K, and whether it's a video of an 8, could be any 8, doesn't have to be your 8, could be Women's Olympic 8 race, and you're going to Cox whichever boat you want. It's kind of genius stuff. It's probably already happened. We went over this. Everything's been done in rowing, but this is definitely one I'm going to pass on in this time to other Coxsons. It's like, do a 500 recording.
Yeah.
Get in,
And that's, you know what,
show it to me.
you know what I
Share
find?
it with your oarsmen or your oarswomen and see what they think about
That's
it.
hard for a lot of
And
coxswains to do.
I believe you.
It really is. Like, people
Like, imagine.
they get very nervous. It's like they feel like they're put on the spot. So I hear from a lot of young coxswains, like, I need to get a recording, but like, I hate the sound of my own voice. I hate recording. Like, I just feel like I'm under pressure and like, I'm not going to do my best just watching a recording, like trying to get into it and cox it. And so there are a lot of like weird challenges. I know you kind of have to do what you have to do. So,
but those challenges are exactly the type of what stimulates the growth and the maturity and the evolution. Like,
absolutely.
I don't like the sound of my own voice. Well, maybe you just don't know the sound of your own voice well enough yet.
Yeah.
And as you know, when it comes to presenting a tone or a role, that's going to have a different sound to your voice. It's not going to be classroom voice or hanging out with your friend's voice, or, you know, it's a different voice. And so saying you don't like the sound of your voice, that just means you haven't quite found your particular tone for the role that you're playing. And the other thing I've been telling coxswains since I was in coaching capital in high school is take a theater class, take a what's it called when you spontaneously start?
Oh, like improv.
Take an improv class. That would be for anybody really, but absolutely for a coxswain. An improv class. If you only want to take one theater class, take the improv class. And I would say take at least a few, because that is, whatever the role it is, you will have a small bit of refined and polished skill set in just getting into a role. And as this is another part of coaching that I would like to include going forward in our team is more for the coxswains. And so, like what I just talked about, like, why didn't I think of this before? Do a 500. What do you mean? Do a 500. Run it. Watch one on the Olympics or whatever. No sound, and cox those guys. Pick the winning boat. Pick the boat that was winning and didn't win. Like, how are you gonna? Yeah, you know the result, but it's gonna change the way that you work with that boat. And then say, hey, whoever your teammates are, here's some 500 stuff, or here's a 2K. I'm coxing you through a 2K. There's no reason why you can't do that, and I'm sure that it's being done already. And another thing we can do with Zoom is have our coxswains, like one of our rowers calls up one of our coxswains, will you Zoom cox me through a 2K or a 500 or whatever? I think that's something that, well, I'm gonna bring that up. So. Yeah,
that's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Yeah. So just on that topic.
Thanks for getting that out of me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, no, that's
great journalism.
Thank you. Well, go on.
Great journalism.
While we're on that topic, this is obviously geared towards coxing as well, and I get loads of questions from coxswains, and most of them are telling me things like, I'm not coached. What do I do? Like, I'm just expected to have this learning curve that's insane, but no one's teaching me how to do anything. And I'm having a lot of trouble developing my style. So what would you guys say that you do on the water? Let's say you've gotten coxswains in. How do you help develop coxswains on the water? What would you recommend that coxswains do out on the water to become better, more confident, and more of a leader than just someone who's steering the boat?
Well, if that coxswain's in a situation where it's very much a classic, I would say, martial arts situation where you watch and learn. There is no, and like, you're just not getting a lot of conversation and feedback from, say, coaches. One, you can ask them, and again, a lot of times the recording is important because I usually never hear what's actually going on. So really the front lines are, you need to ask your athletes a lot. Like, ask them in the way that I need to know this stuff. I want to get better. Like, you got to tell me. Just tell me. And establish a precedent in that regard. And so now at least that coxswain has direct feedback from the people that they are actually trying to get the boat, move the boat, rather than, because coxswains are stuck in the middle. Like in a classroom, say, if I just know what the teacher wants, I can work hard and try to do that. Well, now you've got oarsmen in a boat, or rowers in a boat, and coaches in a launch. And a lot of times, sure, we all want the same thing, want to win races, want to make boats go fast, but in the moment, many, many times there's maybe even opposite things that each of those groups want. And so
this is sounding accurate.
Yeah. And so, I like to try to provide space after practice. Meet with your boat, whatever the lineup was. It doesn't only, we're not only meeting as boats after or when we're in race lineups. It's lineup for the day, meet afterwards. We try to create space for that in practice. That's huge. That's like frontline or immediate feedback as much as you can get it. And then, with UC San Diego, we had a very short window to start to work with a brand new team. So there's a lot of stuff that we're getting in place. Luckily, we have some really great coxswains and a very good culture. And our team works very well together, while I would say, and also pushing at one another, not letting up. Like, they're honest with one another, but they are also the most healthy honesty I've ever seen. It's rarely, I would say, is it brutal honesty. It's honesty, which is brutal enough typically, especially for most of our younger athletes these days. Just the honesty is like, it could be shocking.
Yeah.
You don't have to put like an aggressiveness to it typically. So that's the number one, and then but I would also. Well, that's why there's people like you, and go out and get this knowledge from a clinic or someone who's got experience. So.
Oh my gosh. I mean, all the time. And I always tell coxswains too, like, ask smart people what you think are stupid questions. Like, I go to the smartest people in rowing that I can find, and I'll ask them, like, what do you think the perfect catch looks like? Or how do you think the change of direction should feel on the front end? And like, I think I know what it should be, and I have my idea for what it should be, but you never know what you're going to hear from someone else that's like, oh,
yeah.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And you always learn. Like, you never stop learning.
No.
In the sport.
No.
And so
the only way that you stop learning is if you, as a person, put a limit, right? If
you
put your own limit.
And a lot of times that's ego.
I agree.
A lot of times it's ego.
It's a level of overconfidence, and I think in competition there is absolutely a very, very important time and place to be like, even though everybody knows and you kind of probably think you're not going to win the competition, you go in as if you're going to win.
Oh yeah.
All the time. But there are other times where that doesn't, like, that level of confidence isn't going to help. So.
Right. So now, going back to the COVID thing a little bit, you have these guys that are kind of training over summer, coming back. You might get some fresh blood on the team. What kinds of athletes do you tend to like to bring onto your team? Is it mostly, are you looking at erg scores? Are you looking at personality? Are you looking at, what catches your eye?
Everywhere I've gone so far, it always has to be, it's the mind. It's who that person is there, and that, there's several different metrics. So their disposition, it is definitely, I play the psychological money ball first. And obviously if there is not enough indicators of their potential athletic ability, okay, well, I don't need, maybe they're tough, maybe they're not, but it's not going to work. But if the academics are good enough, like that we can work with them, and they have shown some the right level or amount of potential by what they've already done in the sport, or again, if we're talking novices, whatever they've done in whatever sports they've been a part of, okay, then is this the right fit, like mental-wise, person-wise, personality-wise? When you're talking about an individual who's still in adolescence and moving from high school to college, there can be, and oftentimes is, a 180-degree personality change. And that could be, obviously the ones that aren't helpful are, wow, this kid convinced everybody, myself, the whole team, that he was going to come in and be a game changer. Oh, I guess now he wants to party. Okay, well, not going to work. That happens all the time. Or the person that you counted out. You're like, I like him, and I just like and he's like the last guy you might put in your class or something. He just crushes it. I feel like I've been an underdog all my life, and in the competitions, I love that feeling, and so I that's one of the greatest joys that I get in in sport is watching someone who I counted out. I said, I don't think so, but
Yeah.
and then they just kill it. So
the surprises.
Yeah,
Always
those are
fun.
super fun.
The
Super
good
fun.
surprises.
Yeah.
How big is your team?
We have 4-8s, and we're probably I don't know how that's going to change going forward, but that's where we ended up. Which is enough. 4 5/8 is plenty, especially when you have 2 coaches on staff.
Loads.
Yeah, it's plenty.
It's so great.
Yeah.
And so you get to pull from obviously high schools from all over. And are you also looking internationally?
At this point, it's like international athletes they're always going to contact you. I think anywhere I've been, you get contacted, but it's like, okay, well, does your team have the resources financially to support that? So the access is available if you have the ability to support those athletes. And like when I was at Oregon State and now I'm at UC San Diego again, that's not there yet. And so there's conversations, and you want exposure. Like you definitely want to have those conversations. You don't just ignore the emails. But it's not. I mean, there's a very small number of men's rowing teams out there that can do that.
Yeah.
And but again, who knows how fundraising evolves and all those things. So I'm sure that we're hopeful that we can get into that market. But at the same time, I think I mentioned before the interview started, we're lucky to be in the Southern California area, and just that area alone and its population density of athletes, high school athletes, give me 0.02% of interest in walking on to just our one team. I don't know. That's way more than enough people to deal with. We just have to get the exposure out there. So
one thing I think that's so cool about that is that you hear about so many of these top level programs that have so many internationals on their programs. Do they need that to be that good? Is that the reason for their success? And it's hard to say, because if you're saying, I mean, obviously we're in Southern California, we have athletes here. Can we compete on that level with what we have here in the US?
What I can tell you is I'm very, my hope obviously is to stay on staff for a certain number of years with UC San Diego to find out how we can evolve and grow the speed of that program. And that we have no choice but to find out.
Yeah.
if we can get walk-on athletes from other sports backgrounds that can compete with what essentially is the top level of rowing talent on the planet, as established with the background of rowing, right?
Literally.
Yeah, and everyone, it's more rare at one of the larger programs who has more scholarship funding to find a novice that gets into an upper boat, but it absolutely still happens. I mean, I hear at least 1 or 2 a year, even within the school, like, oh, he was swimming and then he hopped on the rowing team and now he won 552. Is like in his first season as a junior. And okay, well, then if he can get the rhythm down, that's obviously going to be very useful. And even if he doesn't ever get that skill level of rhythm to get into it to the varsity 8, with that kind of horsepower and his athleticism from a swimming background, I'm sure he's going to get in a boat on that team that races and help them go faster. So,
yeah. So, what do you think that UCSD has to offer that a lot of schools don't? Because I mean, it sounds like you're in a pretty unique situation where obviously, I mean, who doesn't love San Diego anyway? But besides the location, like why would guys come row for you?
As an academic institution, I'm learning a lot about this, but obviously they're well ranked, they're reputable, so it's a desirable diploma brand to have, and you're going to get a good education there. A lot of our guys, they're very bright. I mean, it's impressive. They definitely impress me. And rowing wise, unfortunately we lost our first season, so Coach Bond and I really didn't get a chance to show anything really.
Yeah.
All we have are stories, and I think from what I'm aware of, our athletes had good experiences with us, but we got to wait another year, right?
Yeah.
So right now for the rowing, I think it's location, it's a good degree, and it's a fully funded team. We're between Division II, Division I, so with rowing, I mean, we compete with everybody's Division I anyway because we're not NC2A, at least men's rowing. But still, as an institution, as a department, an athletic department, that's a big deal. And so that promotes hype, and that's fun maybe to be a part of. Maybe that would be the story that a recruit would want. I don't know.
I like the sound of just having like 4 to 5 8s across all the time. Race it. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, that's so cool. You know, I've been on teams where it's literally 1 8 and we, you know, paddle around for a long time. And there's a huge difference. You race differently. You know, you have a totally different experience when you've got a fleet.
Yeah.
To train with. You're in San Diego.
Well, you know, you're well aware of the network of water there. I mean, it's I've been fortunate enough to coach and row on 3 of the best bodies of water in the world, I think, to row on. The Mission Bay complex here, and then Lake Natoma, and the estuary. You know, they all have every body of water has its, you know, boundaries and whatnot, but all of those have one huge advantage, which is length. You know, you can essentially row without stopping for a very long period of time, which is great, and they're relatively protected. And you can find a lot of protected water even on rough days. And then, of course, with San Diego, the weather is favorable most of the time. I mean, the only thing that will keep us off the water is fog. But that's about it. So
yeah, it's not too bad.
Yeah,
it's not too bad. Okay, so what are, just before I ask the next question, like what are a couple things that you would recommend for guys that might be interested in rowing for you, as well as coxswains?
Typically, I would say when it comes for rowers, you want to have a good reason to contact. And so if you've done an erg or a workout, whatever it is, and you're impressed, talk to those coaches. You know, I think it's before you even do that, I would say you got to step through the boundary of fear that you may have, or apprehension about communicating with these programs that you may be enamored with. They may be on a pedestal. It's like, oh, I don't want to mess up the first impression. Just get it out there. I'm sure that there are some programs out there that will look at an email, and if you mistyped it, just gonna, sorry, you know, that should be an uppercase I instead of a lowercase I. I'm not like that. Like I do my best to respond to every email. There's a lot of emails, and so the other thing is, if you don't get a response, you got to follow up with a text, follow up with a call. And this applies. This is the advice I give every recruit, to do that with every program you're interested in. I really like to be just fair, open, biased. I want, like we talk about the mentality. Well, part of that personality disposition is they want to come to your program. Like that's their number one choice. Like if you can get a person that in their mind is you're their dream school, well, they're probably going to do everything they can to, you know, make your boats go faster. So that's huge. Make the communication happen no matter what, and follow up. And if you have sports performance achievements, like I just say, if you impress yourself, I want to know. And with coxswains, you know, like we talked about earlier, if you don't have recordings from this year or anything you like or current, then start making your own up and send them out there. And if you don't have that, or you didn't hear this podcast, then just phone calls, like communication, because that you need to get to know the coaching staff as much as you can, and they need to get to know you. And what I also tell a lot of, and luckily since we're on the West Coast, most of the coxswains I've talked to are in California, and so they have old teammates on our team now. And everywhere I've gone, this is another thing I tell potential student athletes is talk to your friends on those teams. I'm telling you what I tell you, but just two different, you know, you need to try to cross-reference that information. What is it? What do they think?
Totally.
Hopefully, you know, I think in part maybe because I just try to be fair, open about it. They're pretty similar stories, you know, from both sides, so they're congruent. But that's what I would advise in the recruiting game, you know, and in particular in rowing. You know, most coaching staffs aren't big enough to where we've got someone traveling all the time, and we know what you like. There's so many. I don't know who's out there. Like I very much rely on people contacting me. Even just going to certain programs on a recruiting trip and watching some practices, it's not very much, you know. So
Yeah, you really have to have those people
You got to
coming to
advertise
you.
yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, big football teams have full-time folks on the road scouting. So.
Man,
yeah,
it's crazy. Well, with a lot of this, I mean, we're still getting, cancellations for races. Like, there's just not a lot of hope in sight still for, I know we're still going into summer, but, what do you think about Head of the Charles? Is Head of the Charles going to happen?
I have no idea.
There's so much speculation. Everyone's like, what?
These giant events in all sports that are still like, a few months out, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot. Then I think it's not inappropriate to put a lot of hope that we're going to have this event happen.
Yeah.
So I think that I know, of course, there's a lot of energy of people that want this to happen. Is the timing going to work? I don't know. I mean, a lot in this time, I've been using, and this isn't my term, of course, but since there's so much uncertainty in the future, if it's going to happen, it must be divine timing. Like it's very much meant to happen in this world of uncertainty right now. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful that it happens. I don't know. Yeah, it'll be a fun time to get together.
Yeah,
for sure.
So are you basically just kind of doing what you usually do anyway at this time of year, just kind of looking, again, kind of keeping in touch with people and keeping in touch with your team that's already there. So things are fairly normal for you right now for this time of year,
right?
I guess.
As far as my role as a recruiting coordinator, there's a similar, or maybe there's more or less, but there's, in my workflow, there's always like about this much contact that I'm keeping up with. So it has not been difficult at all to get new contacts and build relationships with current contacts. It's been fairly normal. The only thing that we're not doing is, normally we would talk about official visits, right? So that's the only part of the conversation that is not on the table right now. So we don't know how those things are going to quite shape up. I'm sure it'll be straight Zoom meetings with the team. I don't, there's ways to get around it and the only thing that I want to be able to do is have that opportunity for the student athlete, the potential student athlete, to get to know our current roster members, right? That's really, the visit is for, in a huge way, for that PSA to meet our group, and for them to interact and find out if, integration is, I can see that happening, or nope, there's definitely, I got my answer. So that's an important piece of the visit, and so that's going to change. We have to figure out how to work around that.
Yeah, it seems like there's so much of that. Everyone's figuring out how to. No one's done this before,
right? Small bits of practicing, I'm sure, in certain virtual worlds, but yeah, on this scale, on a global scale, this is
pretty bananas.
It
really is. It really is. I know. The amount of posts, Instagram is all like, oh, look at this erg I did in my sweaty garage today.
Yeah.
Oh,
a lot of Strava.
Erg
pictures right now. It's just like pictures of the erg stream.
Exactly. So I know a lot of people are kind of cross training right now, and just doing whatever we can. Like I said, we're not even, most of our boathouses aren't even open.
Right.
Like,
forget. Some things are just slowly starting to have restricted openings.
Exactly. I know some places in Europe, they've started opening up a little bit. People are able to go in small boats, like singles.
SDRC, I believe, as well. I saw some single getting a lesson today when I was there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it might be the single for me for a while. I'm not sure. Well, this is another thing actually that I do tell coxswains too. I'm like, you should learn to row.
Absolutely.
Before you really try to cox, or do both at the same time. But if you don't know what you're asking of your guys or women,
like if you're still in the moment of trying to figure out what to ask, that's a problem.
Exactly.
There's going to be strangeness in the communication.
That was a much more eloquent way to put that.
Professional coach.
Right. All professional. All professional.
For sure.
Yeah, but it's really true. And I think, getting into schools, maybe this would be a time for coxswains to get in singles, or, guys that are interested, get in singles, learn as much as you can about rowing. So again, they have something maybe unique to come to you and say like, look, I've been rowing for as long as our boathouse has been open, you know, safely distanced, whatever. You know, in a single, you know, I put the time in, I'm doing the recordings, and I think there's so much value in getting in a boat. You know, I've had to do head races myself, and my God, rowing hurts. I was like, ooh, man.
So you're able to see the difference between, you know, like how uncomfortable, and I've really tried to remove the word hurt and pain from the sensation that racing brings. It's really uncomfortable. But it's not tissue. I mean, sure, there's tissue damage to some, but it's not like injury producing pain, right? And from my background of training jiu-jitsu, which, I mean, that was the first sort of contact sport I got into post rowing. When you get that type of injury to come on, there may or may not be any pain at all, and it's too late, man. So to tap.
Exactly.
But with racing sports, you are in a sense, you're in charge of the level of discomfort you're going to put yourself through. But if you're a real racer, that doesn't factor into what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You know, but you know, that, as you are well aware, that takes, you know, when I first started rowing, there was almost my entire novice year into I mean, of sort of figuring out how that was going to go down. Like,
you navigate your discomfort.
Like, this voice is really loud. Do I feel like I should probably let up right now? Why is that voice so loud? Is something bad going to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to, and if you have good coaches, you know, they're able to get you through, and coxswains and teammates, they are able to get newbies through that barrier. But as I said, you're never going to be a real racer if like, once it gets to 6,000 RPM and PM at 500 degrees, you take your foot off the gas. It
absolutely.
You're not racing anymore.
Absolutely. So. And I'm talking strictly like, as a coxswain, I wasn't training on the erg. I wasn't doing any, you know, I sat down in a boat, just started rowing, and then I was like, oh boy.
You get lit up quick, and then you're in it. You know, you're like, I guess this is the sensation for the next 16 minutes.
Exactly. And I'd always been an athlete, you know, like I do Ironman triathlons, I run marathons and stuff, but like rowing was a whole different thing. But when you know what you're asking, you know, if you know what it feels like, or if you know
how uncomfortable it is.
I know.
You can almost sympathize.
Exactly.
Man, guys, I know how much this hurts, but we're just gonna have to push through.
But you're gonna have to do it for me for another 500 meters.
And I know that you can.
And I know that you can, and you will. So.
And in those, when you have, when you get a group, say if in a season I'm coaching a group, and I get them to that point where, okay, they're racers. Now I've got to be more responsible as a coach. You know, I can't just, let's go burn down the house every day. No, that's inappropriate. Like, they'll do it if they've gotten past that point and they're true racers now, but then they're not going to recover, and they're not going to, you know, there's a whole, again, an evolution in the curriculum and a process to getting that speed, say at the IRA, like getting that performance, whatever it is. And obviously, one, you got to have motor racers, and then you've got to tune them up. And what's so great about the coxswain is, like, you know where they're at. Like, if you've been in boats, you know the distraction of discomfort that they're dealing with to get the blade in the water. And so you've got to, you know, I'm sure all good coxswains do this. They are able to feel, like, a level of empathy. What aspect of the rhythm just needs to be, you know, it's like, spin this plate, spin this plate, spin this plate, spin this plate, and we won. Maybe by, you know, a deck, but you, as a coxswain, you knew, and you said, okay, I see the other boat, I see where they're missing in their rhythm, I see there's a hiccup there, if there is. Hopefully you can see, you know, you can find it, and then you can capitalize on it. You know, you can make sure that your boat doesn't develop maybe that same hitch in the rhythm, or in thereby taking advantage of the other boat in the race. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And our coach at Coast, Larry Moore, used to always tell us, like, there is a very finite amount of time that I can ask the utmost effort of my athletes. And I mean, all they have to give. There's a finite amount of times, even during the year, you know, that I can ask them to truly go to the bottom of the well. And so I need
pure abandonment,
exactly,
real abandonment,
and I need to choose those times very carefully. And so it's definitely the same, I think, with coxswains, in a race or practice or whatever it is. It's
yeah, and one of the ways, that you have to be, we'll just say clever, or as a coach in running workouts over the course of a whole season, a training cycle, is using the rate, right? And so, you're not going to be able to burn a crew down. If they're conditioned, they're ready to go, you're not going to burn them down at an 18 or a 20, no matter how long you row for. And they're going to be able to just leverage, just enjoy full lever, full swing, full acceleration of the handle.
chopping wood.
Yeah, for an hour, 2 hours, and then you go home. You get once you get the crew conditioned up to that level, and that happens every year. If it doesn't, you miss something. But how often, like you said, there's very few times where now we're going up, because at the race cadences, yeah, that's where you get that you need that abandonment has to be in there. So.
Now, what do you think, again, because a lot of coxswains listen in, what do you think are 2 to 3 maybe specific things that coxswains can do in a boat to sort of get better at that? So we have a lot of like newer or younger coxswains that do listen in, but it's very hard to learn boat feel. It just takes time. A lot of it is literally just learning what something is supposed to feel like, and time. So you learn a lot about what it doesn't feel like. So what would you say maybe to some of your newer coxswains to try to just hone in a little bit more on looking out for that feeling, like getting to know your guys, knowing that they're starting to get tired and their catches are slipping a little bit, but being able to pick up on that?
Yeah.
And it's not easy. There's not like one answer to that.
No, it's going to take, again, a relationship between coach coxswain, maybe stroke seat and coxswain to, I'll frequently, when a boat's, say, moving well, and, I'll be looking at an absence of check in the hull movement and whatnot. I'm saying, do you feel that? Or maybe in a boat that's like, oh, in particular check, like, do you feel the check? Okay, so do you feel it? Yes. Okay, that's important. Or if you're trying to increase the capacity of that coxswain's awareness to finer details, like, I don't know, 6-man is really aggressive and kicking the crap out of the front end and checking the boat. Everybody else seems to be doing okay. And maybe I'll even say 6-man, we're going to do this as an exercise, because we need to teach your coxswain what it feels like for you to do that, and then we'll go through the boat, because as you know, during a race, when you're running hot, it becomes extremely hard to keep an efficient rhythm. Something may falter. And if you can tell exactly who it is with staying right here, well, that's a valuable skill set. It's incredibly valuable. So, you've got to get a real sensitive tushy. You got to, all of your nerve endings are now like at the tip of everybody's oar, bow to stern, all through the hull, right? So just like any race car F1, any race car driver, any of them, they want to be able to feel exactly how that vehicle, in this case a paid-oared shell, is performing, moving. If they got a bearing going out in the right rear wheel or whatever wheel or something like that, or anyway, does that make sense?
I love it. No, I was like enamored. I was like, wait, tell me more. Like, I feel like I'm learning things. I've never
great.
thought about that way. It's so poetic. It's amazing.
Repeating what's already been said.
Yeah, well, take credit where you can get it.
Thank you.
I think it sounds good. So before I ask the last question that I ask everybody, and is there anything else that you feel like we didn't cover, or that you thought we should touch on? I mean, I feel like we really talked a lot about the effects of this COVID-ness mess, and what people might do to get into schools.
Yep, I think we covered a lot of what's the current situation really well. Can I get some shout outs?
Oh, please.
One shout out I definitely want to give is to Anderson Burrell, and encourage breath work in all of any competitive athlete's curriculum of training. And I've been doing his particular technique, and I'm aware of many others. A lot of this is ancient knowledge. It's nothing necessarily novel, but I've been using it directly with cycling, and it's increased my capacity noticeably. That's what I can tell you, very noticeably. I would just shout out to him, and I hope that if you know of him, fantastic. Keep talking with him, keep working with him, and if you don't, look him up. Anderson Be Well on Instagram and whatnot. So, thank you.
It's a good one. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, definitely highly recommend looking at those extra things, those little things that sort of are the gravy on top of just the training. You know, they kind of give you that X factor. So, okay. So, I love to ask people at the end, what do you think makes a good coxswain great? Why would you pick one over another?
Oh man, I mean,
and you can do it from a rower perspective or a coach perspective.
Yeah, from a rower perspective, it's someone who has that level of confidence. Even if they make mistakes, they know how to deal with that in a way that makes, like, if I'm, in high school and college, I found myself in stroke seat a lot. So I'm sitting right across from the coxswain, and there have been, different coxswains that handle making mistakes differently, and especially handle, say, me being a real jerk in race mode, and just like, I don't have time for mess ups here. And then being able to handle it and like shut me up and like, got it. So it's like very well balanced level of confidence, and just being able to do it all, which includes me making mistakes. I can make mistakes, because we're going to make them anyway. Everybody does. So that's one. And just sort of saying, like, two coxswains who are of equal ability, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe if that's a difference, that's enormous. Someone who never really falters, because they're driving you. So if you can trust them, that's it. You got to have that. For a coach, and this is tough to know. Well, not really. You just talk to their coaches and find out, and try to find out as much as you can. But I want someone who can run a practice, who can be sort of just seamless. It's like it reduces the perceivable effort that I, as a coach, have to put into practice. When I've got to give clear instructions to my coxswains, I can't just, megaphone on the side of my mouth, move your boat to port, and then move your boat to port. It's like, well, you think that they're going to hear you? I mean, are you just setting up a situation where I can, flex my authority muscle or something? So I've got to clearly state what I want for them, and then they do it, and that's it, right? And then the higher levels of that are, okay, he misspoke, the coach misspoke, but I know what he actually wants, and that happens, as you know, a lot. And so
you do a lot of interpreting.
Yeah,
yeah.
and that comes specific. There are situations where that comes up, where knowing the race, knowing your course, or knowing your body of water makes that possible. It's like, we always do it this way. I know he literally said the opposite thing, but it was, he said right when he meant left, right?
Yeah.
So I know that I'm not driving into the shore. I'm not going into the shallows. Like,
yeah.
So there's that level of ability that is in play as well. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, gosh, thank you so much for your time, and for coming over and doing it live in the studio. It's so much more fun, like having somebody in the studio with me. So I'm glad it worked out. Yeah. So definitely, where can we follow you on social media, or UCSD? Yeah, follow UCSD M Rowing on Instagram, and right now the only social media outlet I've got Strava. That's probably you see my best side on Strava, to be honest. And then I just have my own personal Instagram account, which I've been very active on much at all. But okay, well, send people to UCSD. Yeah, that's where you want to send them. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again so much again for your time, for coming over and everything. And obviously, you guys know you can always write into me at the Candid Cox or Iron Will Wit on Instagram. I'm there all the time. We have so much more coming up. So we will see you guys again next week on another episode. So thank you so much, and see you guys later. Bye.